Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Unblocking Success podcast. My name is John Pearce, Head of Commercial for London Drainage Facilities. If you're new around here, be sure to like, share, subscribe at your nearest and dearest. The whole purpose for this podcast is to unlock and shine a light on some of the brightest talent within the facility management sector and service sectors in general. Today, I'm incredibly lucky and fortunate enough to be joined by Nigel Lucker, who's the Head of Facilities, the Director of Facilities for the University of Suffolk. Enjoy. We'll just kick straight into it. Nigel, thanks so much for taking the time to come down.
My pleasure.
You could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to spend a little bit of time in here with me today. Hope you enjoy the surroundings and settings. It's certainly better than some of the environments I've been in plumbing and drainage. So good to see you. Good to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
No problem at all. So listen, I'll probably say the best place to start is at the beginning. We were just talking a little bit off air. So why don't we rewind the clock slightly and go back to the beginning and make our way through?
No, pleasure. So I'm a Director of Estates and Facilities at the University of Suffolk currently. My job never started as a director. I fell into facilities management, I would say. Partly by someone putting me in there, but I started out being a retailer. I always thought retail was going to be my direction of travel. So I studied in Leicester Square to get a degree and everything else in retail management. I never finished the course because as part of the course, you had to present every year to a bit like a Dragon's Den type scenario, not as bad as The Apprentice, but a bit like Dragon's Den. And there were some people in the audience and you present your business case to them as if it was your own business. And a person came up to me and talked to me about what I was doing. And the next few weeks' time, they contacted me and said, could we talk to you about maybe giving you an opportunity with our organisation? I said, I'd love to talk to you. Thinking it would be after I finished my course, but they said that they would pay for my course to be finished if I wanted to, so long as I could join them. It dawned on me I'd better ask who they were, and they were Mothercare UK at the time, one of the largest retailers at that time in the UK. Of course, Mothercare, we all know that they were there for babies' accessories and mother support. And I joined their junior management program, as they called it at the time. And I found myself being the first male manager of Mothercare UK all those years ago. Fast forward a little bit to where we are today. Now, I felt quite isolated, equality was sort of flipped on its head a little bit. I went to a conference once and I was the only male person there and people thought I was a speaker rather than being in the audience. And when I sat in the audience, they couldn't work out what I was doing. I think they were trying to call for security. They thought some weirdo had just turned up in their conference. Yeah, exactly, get rid of him. Yeah. But that just showed, at the time, of course, I never realised that. I never recognised that at all. It took a little while to break it down, though. They talk about stereotyping. I saw it on the receiving end as a male manager or trainee manager at the time. But then I went on to manage one of their largest stores in Wolverhampton and then in London. And it taught me a lot about what I thought I was going to do going forward. A great company for management training. I didn't bother finishing my course. I thought I learned a lot more from Mothercare training program. And I was there for a number of years. As part of that program, I was asked if I would mind opening some concessions and some smaller shops. And they had a company called Now. It was trying to fit the market between the Mothercare and the young adults. So they were looking for 12, 13, 14-year-old clothing. So we opened a number of shops and I led that program. Because of that, I met a guy from DTZ called David Cure. And David was the client and DTZ, he was the agent, he was putting us in places. And I was learning more about the property side of things and what is concession, what do you mean by facilities management, what's a lease and that type of stuff. And fast forward a little while, he said, look, he wanted to start up a facilities management division. Would I be interested in supporting him doing that? I then realised that I ought to ask him a bit more about what facility management meant and management. So that's how I fell into it, really.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's mad.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Going back, looking at the Mothercare journey and being the only male manager in the business. Yeah. I mean, that's
The first one as well, so no one's going to take that off me again.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're going to have that record forever,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
That must be such a learning point. I'm going to choose my words carefully here, but that would be a baptism of fire in the sense of understanding working ways. Because I can imagine from a prejudice point of view, you're going to get a lot of people coming off the street, I'd imagine, that maybe from a male management perspective in that environment might not necessarily want to talk to
it wasn't
a
a direction of travel that people thought they were going to go into. There was males working at Mothercare, clearly, but they were in buying, or they were in the head office, or they were head accounts, or they were doing something else. This was a male manager in a store. Now, it wasn't just the team I had to win over. It was the public. So there was occasions when people used to come in and say, can't speak to the manager. The lady would go and say, someone wants to see you. I think their pram's not working correctly. So I'll walk out and say, can I help you? I understand your pram's not working. It's okay. I'm waiting for the manager. Because they wasn't expecting to see a young man standing in front of them. There were on occasions when suddenly they decided they were okay. That no, we don't need to see anybody. We walk out. So obviously there was things there that I had to learn about. Now, today, you would never think about toilets, right? But the store, one of the stores I worked in, only had one set of toilets.
Right.
And I had to go across the way to the Wimpy Bar. That shows you how long ago it was. The Wimpy Bars was around then. To use their toilets. And I put on weight like no one's business. So every time I went in, I had a burger and a cup of coffee. But that just shows you that this can't be right, surely. But it was accepted in the time. It was not right. It was all wrong. And I remember the very first discussions about diversity, and that happened at Mothercare. They realised that actually we've got to do something about this. And it was about, well, how do we, and they call it equality, how do we become more equality biased to both sexes? And now, of course, that agenda's moved on greatly, rightly so. And in my role now, it's probably one of the first things when we design a floor, in my role now at the university, it's about where are the toilets, where are the worshipping rooms going, oh, okay, we need a classroom. It's probably the last thing on our agenda now. We make sure that the equality agenda is alive and kicking in everything we do, front and centre. And I think that experience helped me.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say some of the biggest lessons you took away from your time at Mothercare would have been?
I think that inclusion, and as a leader now, as a director, I'd never forget how isolated I felt sometimes in some of the discussions amongst my own team. The trust and inclusion piece. So I took away, how do I, it's up to me as a role as a manager, how do I break those barriers down? How can I, and I was young at the time, I was inexperienced, how do I do that? And of course I fell over a few times trying to do that. Watching what I say, how I say it, and how do I make sure that I feel included in the discussions that they're having about their work. Usually it's the other way around. How do they feel included in what the manager or the leader wants to happen and their objectives? So I was trying to identify the right routes to navigate those positions. And that's what I've taken away all the way through my career. And we'll come on to it a little bit later on, but I revisited that position again when I went to work abroad, because it's a different culture, different way of living. You can't be expecting them to change for you. You have to make the effort to change. And I felt that's even at that young age, I had to do something myself to change the way that we talk to each other and be included in the conversations.
So the journey from Mothercare into the world of facility management, at face value, that looks like night and day differences, right?
It was. I went into, again, I found myself in an arena that I wasn't very used to. I just got used to retail management. I was doing okay at it. And now I'm out of arena and doing this thing called facilities management for DTZ, which is called a management agent. What's all that about? So I found myself learning a brand new sector. I felt that I was enjoying it. I found a niche there that I could react quickly. And then I realised that both at Mothercare and this sector, that it was about supporting the core business. Whatever I was doing, it was about supporting the core business. And I recognised that immediately, that I was there not to do their business, but to support them in being able to do theirs better and taking hours off them and giving them hours back so they could concentrate on that. So everything we did about managing the premises, and most of it was multi-let properties
Right.
For DTZ. It was about touching base with the tenants. Are they happy in the property? Because they're not. What they're going to do, they're going to leave and go and pay someone else rent somewhere else. So we were doing everything we could to identify what their challenges were as a tenant, and then feeding that back to their client, but acting as the company that owned the issue.
Yeah. Do you know, for me, that I often think that facility management gets massively overlooked, in the sense of, for me, facility management feels like the glue that holds it all together. You can go out from a commercial team or a sales team on behalf of a brand and go and win the attraction of a new potential client coming into the building.
Yeah.
But really, it's about the experience, the journey, the problems that happen while the client is in the building and out.
Absolutely. And for me, the client, it might be CIA, it might be an pension fund that own the building.
Yep.
They're not actually in the building.
Yep.
Their tenants are, though.
Yep.
And they are reliable, and their tenants paying rent and being happy in that experience they're having in that building. So if the drains aren't working, they're going to tell you. If the lift's out of auction, there's only one lift. You got to walk up 5 floors of stairs. It's okay if you're on the ground floor as a tenant, but not if you're on the 5th floor. They're going to tell you. So we were, as a new division within DTZ, and under David Kure's leadership, we were determined to try to get that voice across. There's one KPI as far as I was concerned, and that was what the tenant felt. If they're saying we're doing a good job, they pay their rent on time. There's no excuses. They wouldn't pay their service charge if things weren't right. If they were feeling right and loved, they want to extend their lease and they want to pay their service charge.
Totally.
So that's then I learned about contract management, because we were outsourcing to different cleaning companies. And it's important that they understood what we were trying to achieve. But also, at that time, did I empower them? Not really. I was checking the cleaner. There's really no need to now. I've learned that. One of the guys I met a few weeks ago, he still measures the success on how many times he changes a cleaning company in the last 10 years. He tells me he's changed it 9 times, and he thinks that's a success, even today. We were doing that back in the early days when I had hair, of course. And I think that we have moved on, but we've moved on not at a great pace, really. I think some organisations are better than others.
Yeah. I think your measurement of that KPI really resonates with me, because throughout my career, I always look at the home services sector. You've got obviously the hard element of it, which is unblocking the drain, doing the toilet, or whatever it might be. But the real element to it is how the user of that service is left feeling. And I often say, at the end of the job, when you're about to ask for payment, do you justify that payment with the service you've delivered, right? And if the answer is in any way, shape or form a no or a maybe, then you haven't really met the mark. So it's really interesting that from your perspective, your KPI is more or less exactly aligned with that.
Just one, that's all you need. You can have, and actually the KPIs we have with our service partners are minimal, to be honest with you, because it's about, are they happy? I don't want to know how many bins haven't been emptied that day. I don't need to know. If the customer, how many complaints we've received is far more important, and what we're doing to address that. And indeed, equally important is how many compliments we've received for the service partner. And we celebrate the successes as much as we then try to talk to the service partner about how we're going to resolve any issues that we may have.
Do you feel, coming from that retail perspective, where you're dealing with the general public, that customer experience effectively, which is really what's getting built within your time there, translated and served you well when you came into the world of facility management?
I think it did. I mean, one of the most programs that Mothercare that's driven into you from day one was, how does the store look? So the first 5 minutes of your day was looking at the shop window to make sure it was representing the shop well. I do the same now with landscaping. Or I do the same now with our window cleaning. Does this building represent who we are? If we get through the doors, then great. If it's not, then why? How do we expect students to walk through the front doors if the place is looking right? Particularly on open days and potential students. How do we address that? So we've got to be good, but we also then have to deliver. The best results we have is when I think at the Foreign Office and at the British Transport Police, which we'll come on to later on, The real success was when our service partners was raising more work orders than the customer was, because they were acting as our eyes and ears. They were coming around, and they wanted exactly the same as we did as a client.
Yeah.
And they weren't ashamed of saying the clock's not working or the floor's not right, and they shared the problem. They recorded it, so we get the MI, the management information, but they would put it right as well. And I think that when they're walking around as proud as we are, as the intelligent client in the building, then we've done all right.
Yeah, and I think that is such an important part. It's like, for example, throughout my career, I can think of times where being in the home services sector, and I've been on and off within this sector since the age of 16. I've just turned 38. So, throughout that period. So
I'm there next week, 38.
So throughout that period of time, the one kind of quantifiable metric that I keep coming back to is that piece around, have you done a good job while you're in the property? And the people that are representative of the business, are they picking up the same level of passion and care as the people that we're serving?
Yeah.
Because like you say, if you have, if the drains were clogged up, or the windows aren't done, or the landscaping isn't great, you're never going to get the people coming from the front door to do it.
No.
To attract attractive people, you've got to be half attractive in doing what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
absolutely.
Totally.
And there's no shame in that at all.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if anything, it's reassuring when you find people that are proud about that part of it. It's part of work fulfillment, being in that part. Take me through then the journey from jumping over from Mothercare into facility management, and where that path started to lead you down.
Well, I was at DTZ for a while,
Yep.
And the team grew. I found myself under this first leadership role, management role.
Yep.
Pretty rubbish at it, first of all. Paid someone to do the job, and then was there in case they needed me. I didn't really give them attention. We didn't really use the appraisal system correctly. We didn't have the conversations correctly.
Yep.
But you look around the sector at that time, I'm probably no different to anyone else. David said, we've got to grow the team. We're going to open another office up north. Would you help do that? And that really started to look about what our team was to the business. I suddenly realised that actually we're as important to the business, but the business DTZ, and there's no shame on them. I don't really think they realised how important we were, because they were a surveying business. They were property management, they were surveyors, and we were a very small team supporting the surveyors. But it was us that was making sure that we could do a better job. So one of the things that David came up with is that we would act as the eyes and ears of our surveying company, because our surveyors never really left the office. I think they had to occasionally. Maybe I think their arrangements with their clients was they go and see the property twice a year, and literally they walk up and go, "Yeah, it's still here," and walk away again.
Nothing's but that.
But we could do more than that. We could do their reports for them. We could go and see the surveyors before we went to the property and say, "We're going to 44 today. Everyone paid up, or do you want to just go and see if there's any issues?" And they would bring up the debt list and say, "Actually, yes, there's one tenant. They haven't paid for the last quarter. Just go and find out what's happened." And those discussions were either, "Yeah, okay, we'll write the check," or, "Yeah, well, we're going through a bit of a challenging time at the moment." Now, it became very clear for us as a facilities team that if they're going through challenging times, maybe there's something we could do to help them. And that didn't mean about reducing their rent. I talked to the surveyors, and the surveyors said, "Well, we've got a smaller space in the building across the street. Could we do something about moving them across? They pay less rent. If they're travelling time, are they reducing their staff down?" They were. So we did that. And that's the first time that we started to see that we could keep a tenant, but working with them, understanding their business. So DTZ opened if you're in trouble as a company, come and talk to us. And we were actually in the middle of all that to start off. So that was really, for me, was we could do more as a facilities management company.
Yeah.
The next step was I suddenly realised that I met 4 cleaning companies in 2 days. 3 streets apart and 4 cleaning companies. Why was I doing that? Because we were employing contractors, as they were known now. I call them service partners now. They were employed because of the client we were working for. So if it was CIS, we employed one cleaning company. If it was Scottish Widows, another cleaning company. But the buildings were in the same
area, street.
Yeah. So we overnight reduced our supply chain almost by half. We did a proper tender, and only one company won that cleaning contract. It's great for them, automatic growth. Great for us because we're having one conversation about cleaning across the piece.
One-stop shop.
Exactly. And it was efficiencies. I didn't realise at the time that was what it was, but we were actually able to do more in the same time and become more efficient. And the cleaning company were able to deliver more. We experimented at the time with a 5-year contract, and that's going back some time. Allowed the companies to invest in the contract as much as we could invest in them. And that started to really work. And I got a real light for doing that. I suppose at that time you could call it strategic management.
Yeah.
And I was falling into that by accident, but it was a great step forward. And I didn't look back after that.
Plus you get that loyalty program as well.
Yes.
By going down the route of saying, right, we're going to put our eggs in that basket, so to speak, and we're going to build on the relationship there, it becomes reciprocal, right? It becomes a two-way street where the service partner then becomes that sense of loyalty, ownership, and that linking it back to the bit we were just talking about, that sense of pride really starts to come through because they know not only are we responsible for this dwelling, we'll be responsible for that dwelling as well.
Yeah, exactly.
This is our patch.
And we
area.
did that with our own team.
Yeah.
Across the London and also the UK.
Yeah.
We realised that if we had full cleaning companies, we've probably got 4 FMs working for us, looking at the clients. Yeah. So we just clustered it. We called it a cluster.
Yeah.
And we had one FM looking after a cluster and another one looking after this cluster. So actually they were visiting 4 properties in one day rather than going back one day and sharing cars with people. Yeah. 3 going to the same streets and meeting in the pub afterwards. They can still meet in the pub afterwards, so long as they invite me. Yeah. But actually just go and do a day's work, proper work, and spend more time with the tenant. Yeah. Because that's, you didn't have time if you know. So they were doing that and it worked really well. Yeah, yeah.
So that's a lesson you've learned from there on and you've carried that through, right?
I've carried all that through and hopefully expanded upon it.
Yeah.
And then I left there. I was given an opportunity with another company. That was okay. It was fine. And then I joined NG Bailey. Not NG Bailey. That's one of our suppliers. But it was NG Real Estate.
Yep.
And the guy there by the name of Richard Wilson, who's now running Wimbledon. Right. He was what I would call my first COO of real life. He was a proper
real strong mentor.
Yeah, real strong mentor. The room would stop when he walked in. You knew he was present. But he was the most caring person about his people. And I picked up my first lessons about what people management was from him. Yeah. And he gave me the opportunity to be empowered. You know, he trusted what I did. And I never had to report to him. I felt I had to, but he said, "Why? I'm not asking you for it. Why are you telling me?"
Such an overlooked power.
It was, and you know, this was a real opportunity to use him really as that mentor and a boss, and he repaid it by giving me the opportunities. I've always, and I clearly still have it. I suffered with dyslexia, so I was open with him about, I think I've got some challenges, and I'd never recognised what it was. And he was the first one to put me on a test and see if I was. Got the test and took it and said, right, how are we going to use this? Not what we're going to do about it, but how we're going to use this, because you've got some skills that I think is great. You're great at figures, you're great at analysing stuff, you're thinking outside the box, you're quite a strategic person. Let's use those skills and not worry about this, eh? Yeah. And life's moved on now. I don't struggle with it as much because of technology. But at that time, it could have destroyed me. You know, he could have put me back in the box and I could have gone backwards. Instead, he took me forward and I got my first director role with him. So
big proud moment.
Yeah, big proud moment for me, but I would never be able to thank him enough, I don't think.
Yeah. So talk me through next steps thereafter. I mean, look, in itself, taking a director role, the challenges, you know, I find often, I was talking with somebody else on another episode about this, you know, everyone wants to run for those titles 9 times out of 10. It's career aspiration. It often makes sense. Sometimes it can feel like I want to climb the ladder of a company or career path because it feels like that's the thing I need to do. often be the case. People don't realise what's entailed until you actually get into those roles.
Yeah.
And is that really where I'm comfortable or happy?
Yeah, and you sometimes have to part what you do well to start something new. And I think that's the first place I learned diplomacy in politics, in businesses.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel comfortable in those arenas, to be honest with you. I had a trust issue as well with my own self. And that's when I first experienced, I think, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Really? He's put me in this role?
Yeah.
What's he seeing? I'm not good enough for this, etc., etc. Let me go
we all
back
get
and
that.
But he was insistent, you know, well, you're in the role.
Yeah.
We trust you.
Yeah.
We're here to support you. Just go and have those meetings.
Yeah.
And I suddenly found that I would go to the meetings that I knew something about.
Mm-hmm.
So I could talk about facilities management and what leadership looks like because I know about it.
Yep.
Back in the day, I knew about property and I knew about tenants and I knew where my KPIs and values were. So I could talk about that.
Yeah.
And it worked out well for me.
Yeah.
From there, and I'll go back to politics, I ended up then joining the British Transport Police.
Was that different? Again,
well, it's a different sector, right?
Yeah.
So this is all private sector.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah.
Now I'm in the public sector, and the police force.
Yeah.
And their pips on their shoulders and stripes on their arms, and they're policemen and police women, trying to do a job. So I went back to my core principles. I'm here to support the core business. So how can I make these people's lives easier? We had more policemen at the time behind the desk doing facilities management jobs, taking phone calls about blocked toilets or about the heating's not working or someone's locker's not opening. Surely that can't be right. So the idea of me coming in there was to review what we did. Now, the reason they advertised the role is because at the time, I think it was Ken Livingston, wasn't it? Yeah, Livingston. Said to the British Transport Police and the Met Police at the time, no more money until you put the officers that you got not doing police work back on the beat. Work it out. So the Paul Crowder, another great leader that I worked under, was in charge of the police, British Transport Police at the time. And he said, okay, well, we're going to have to get experts into the fields that they're experts in and allow us to be experts in our field. So what a radical idea that was. He got HR people to do HR jobs. He got facilities team to do facilities jobs. And financial people to do finance. So all of a sudden, the population of police support staff went up. But that made him release 250-ish police officers from behind the desk back on the beat. And he had his officers. There was no need for more money. The mayor at the time gave him more money to get the support staff right. And then we were off and running, really. And a good team. The strategic piece that I've learned over the years, I looked at all these areas and there was a person in charge of radios, a person in charge of uniforms, a person in charge of vehicles. Now, I know nothing about uniforms or radios and certainly not vehicles. But it makes sense to me that it's a support function, so why don't we bring it under one arm? Now, it was a risky move, and I offered to say, look, make us all redundant, and we'll all apply for the role if we want it. But it makes sense to merge our departments together because you're going to save some more money, you're going to find efficiencies, it's going to help your procurement arm. We can all benefit from it. And I was successful winning that position, and we did. We brought it all under one wing at that time. A few months later, after doing that, the terrible tragedies of 7/7 bombings happened in 2005. And I think, again, that's the first time a spotlight on facilities was placed. It wasn't court facilities then, during those events. It was logistics. And, of course, I hadn't realised that's what we were doing. Yeah. We were providing the service to the front line, enabling them to go about their business. They didn't have to worry about the vehicles or the uniforms or the radios, or indeed the police stations, because we were doing that for them. So they could worry about the real business of policing and indeed dealing with
the sharp end of it. Yeah.
Real sharp end of it. I still feel guilty about saying how rewarding that was, because so many people lost their lives that day. And I was watching on TV. It seemed like I was watching something else and not realising I was part of that. Didn't go home for 2 weeks after the event because we had another event a couple of weeks later where a copycat tried to do the exactly same. We had a shooting down at Stockwell where an innocent man got shot. He was identified as being a possible terrorist that day, and events turned out he wasn't, but he was shot. So we had 7 crime scenes at once, and we were managing that. And I guess this is this funny bit of the story. So I started my career with nappies at Mothercare, and I'm finding myself now on the Saturday after the bombings. The bombings happened on a Thursday. I'm at the HQ in London, and Paul Crowther said to me, "Are you free this afternoon?" Well, you're the boss. Yes, I am. He said, "We've got a visitor that I'd like to introduce you to." So I said, "Okay." So there was 5 of us in the room, and Paul Crowther brought in Prince Edward at the time, visiting the first responders. And he introduced the police dog. Andalou's first dog was down the scene. He introduced the mortician that saw the bodies for the first time. Then someone else, and then me. And he introduced me as Mr. Underpants. So I'm thinking, my word, really? Have you just said that, Paul? Really, to Prince Edward? Mr. Underpants. Yeah. And of course, he laughed and said, why do they call you Mr. Underpants? And Paul said, well, let me tell you, because this man here arranged over 200 pairs of underpants for our police officers on the day of the bombing, because he realised they weren't going home. Yeah. And he realised that apart from the food, they probably want a pair of clean underpants in the morning when they get out with the digs, that he's also organised. Yeah. So that was a funny moment. So from nappies to underpants, in a few years. Yeah. But it's great. The funny bit was, though, and on that day of the bombings, I did phone Marks and Spencer's up and said, look, you've heard about the tragedy. Yes, we want to purchase some underwear for our officers because they won't be going home for a few days. Not a problem. Come here at 6 o'clock. We shut at 6. Come around the side door. Meet me, and we give you some trolleys and some people to help you, and you can help yourself. Wow. Okay. I said, and I said, you can invoice us after. He said, no, there won't be any invoicing. So that's Marks and Spencer's offering the help. So we did. We went and I think we cleared their shelves. Any size. Forget the small size for the policemen because they like their food. Let's get all the big stuff. Took it all back, and we were halfway back in these vans, and suddenly realised, rubbish. I forgot the ladies. Now there's me worrying about equality when I first no toilets to use, the Mothercare, and now I'm starting to realise that it's the flip side. Yeah. I've just got a load of underwear for men and nothing for the ladies. So I went back and I found a lady in the shop and said, you're going to have to help me here because I'm not very good at this. Yeah. I asked my girlfriend. Yeah. And she helped me. And, everyone thought we were geniuses. Oh, you remembered us. Yeah, well,
Yeah. I mean, what a rewarding time or a rewarding thing to go through. But on the same token, the memories that must impact on you will forever, right? It's such a...
and I didn't get to see the real sharp end, but I was behind the line, and we set up feeding stations and we gave the relief. It's a really hot day, the last few days after the bombing.
I remember it. I remember
we took sun cream down to them because no one thought about the sun cream. So health and safety all of a sudden was coming to play for me, and say, okay, so we need to give them some sun cream. We went down behind where all the officers were on the front line, behind the barriers, and past all the press cordons. It's really eerie. And I think that's when I realised that actually, I was part of this. It was a proud moment. And I was so proud of the team, really, because we had put all this in place. And the idea about bringing things together and about efficiencies. We do desktop exercises, but this was more than that. This is real life. This is affecting people. And we were helping them and go about their business.
Yeah, real positive impact.
Yeah, and I was honoured to get a police commendation for it, so that's still on my wall at home. And about a month or so after, I got an invite to meet the Queen at Buckingham Palace. So I went to a first responders evening at Buckingham Palace and met the royal family. And I was selected to be in a separate room, along with about 15 other people that were first responders on different incidents. The guy next to me to my right was about 6'7", a naval commander, and he was responsible for the rescue of the submarine that sunk, the Russians that sunk the bottom. 6'7", he's in the submarine. I was more fascinated to know how he survived in the submarine than how he got the Russians out the submarine. But fascinating guy. And then the guy next to me was about 4'6", and he was the first rescue up on a rescue for Mount Everest to rescue some people that wandered off. Yeah. And then you got Mr. Underpants standing in the middle of these two heroes. Yeah. But again, I suppose it shows you that facilities management for me at that time was about the core business.
Yeah.
And yes, we've got our day-to-day business, and yes, we're worried about making sure the lights work. I got a call from a friend this morning saying, did you see Wembley Stadium going in darkness last night during the women's game? It did. Some poor facilities manager is crying in his soup this morning, making sure that doesn't happen again. You get recognised for the bad bits. And Wimbledon, I mentioned Richard Wilson. If that roof doesn't close, or if they're not ready on the first day of Wimbledon, there's no, oh, we're going to be late on that project. Can we open next week for Wimbledon? You have to be right. And if it's not, it's all over the front pages. Yeah. So my role isn't as drastic as that, but it was on that time during the 7/7 bombings. If we didn't get it right and the officers couldn't perform, then we would let them down. So it was a moment just to say facilities management actually is very important. No matter what you do and no matter where you work, if your building's not open on that morning, people aren't going to be very pleased. Yeah. They've got work to do.
I often say that it ties in with facility management. You know, from our point of view as a service partner, we kind of go, you're not needed until you're needed, right? And when you are needed, you really need to show up and you really need to make sure you're doing the job correctly, you know?
Yeah, but you should show up every day. And I think that you always have to be disaster ready.
Yep.
Or audit ready. Yep. You know, expect an audit. Are you ready for it? Expect something to go wrong that day. I wasn't expecting 7/7 to happen. I was doing my financial planning.
Right.
So when I got the call saying, can you come down, forget your financial plan, I was like, yes, great. I don't know what I'm going down to, but I don't have to look at this bloody spreadsheet anymore. Yeah. And went downstairs and then found out what went on. But I wasn't prepared for it. But that taught me to always be ready, and your team should be ready, and your service partner should be ready. Yeah. Everyone that you're working with should be ready for that call.
Yeah. Where did the journey after that end up taking you then?
It took me to Singapore. For the Foreign Office.
Right, okay.
The Commonwealth and Development Office, as they now know. Yes, a role came up. I always wanted to, I was old enough then to say, okay, I want a gig abroad. I was given an opportunity to go and work in Dubai, but the circumstances at that time didn't allow, really. My mother and father were elderly. Working there, I thought, well, actually, you know, not. My son and daughter were very young. My son has spina bifida, so I didn't want to drag them with me to a place that I wasn't quite sure about the health, and he was getting fantastic treatment here. So I turned it down, and I thought, well, that's my gig abroad gone. And then the Foreign Office gig came up, which I applied for and was successful. And that was running Generation 1 for Southeast Asia. They had already outsourced in Europe and UK, and the next one was going to be Asia. So I was based in Singapore, but I had a team that was based in throughout, from Japan through China into Southeast Asia, Jakarta, Thailand, down to Australia as well, and New Zealand. So it was a fabulous opportunity. And now another lesson, you know, this is back in 2010-ish. My team were not in my office.
I was about to say, you were doing remote working
in my office
before remote working became fashionable.
Exactly. So, and that's exactly what we did. We were remote working, and that then taught me an awful lot what David Cure and Richard Wilson had taught me about trust. We trust you. And I remember those words that Richard had said to me when I was sitting in his office. I had to do exactly the same. If they said they were in a building, I had to believe them. But we were such a team at the time that on a Thursday we would have our weekly call, and they'd be opening up their laptops, Skyping in, because it was Skype then, not Teams, Skyping into us, and there they were, one by a pool, no one at a bar, no one's, why not? They're doing their job. We trust them, they've done their job. And we stopped managing the clock then. We didn't really want, so long as the job got done. And because of that trust we've built up, they would go the extra mile for you. And we were a fabulous team. My boss then, another fantastic leader. I've been blessed with some fantastic people over the years. Keith Elliott said to me, look, your opposite number in Europe's leaving. Will you help us with the interview? And I said, I'll do better than that, I'll do it for you. And he said, okay, would you do it for me? And I said, I was only joking. I don't want to come home yet. So he said, it's about coming home. You can do Europe from Singapore. I've looked at the map. It's all connected. You can go off and do it. But that was a real tough gig, because that was now it's a 24-hour clock. Because I was 8 hours ahead in Singapore. managing Asia was fine, but now I was working through almost up till
24 hours a day.
24 hours a day.
Yeah. 25, 8. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was this competition. Asia was seen as the second, I guess, because it was generation one and second to go. Europe was much better in their eyes.
Yep.
But the lessons that we learned in Asia, because the market wasn't so mature in Asia, we had to try a little bit harder.
Right.
And we had to find workarounds, and we had to try to find how we could articulate and talk about programs and projects being slightly longer than it was in Europe, because the Europe market's a bit more mature. So we swapped lessons. It was a challenge doing both, but it was great fun.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to do it.
Yeah.
And manage the team.
Did you find it different in the sense of, so as we were talking a moment ago, I did nowhere near the amount of time in Singapore as what you did, or I had, unfortunately, I didn't do the same amount of time. It shocked me the cultural differences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back then, 2010 was exactly the same time I was out there. The UK.
Did you bump into me and spill me drink one night?
Probably. It probably would have been, mate. If there was drinks involved, it probably was me at that time in my life. So I've always found it surprising coming from the UK over into Singapore, just the cultural differences, their kind of passion, their real intent for wanting to get it right.
Yes.
Really shone through for me.
Yeah.
I found that different.
Yeah.
And then did you find that different when you then kind of had to not only manage Asia, but then Europe?
Yeah. I found a few things. You're absolutely right. I found the cultural changes enriching for me. I was learning from them.
Yeah.
So I was never going to go over and tell them how to do the job. I would tell them what the vision was, even if it was building a wall. I'll tell you a story about earth and plugs in a minute. But building a wall, they say, well, we can't do it this time of year because of the heat. It'll be all wonky and it won't set, so we'll have to do it another time of year. Well, okay, I trust you. I believe what you're saying to me. Are they really telling me the truth? But it was true. Another time, we were designing an extension, or actually, I think it was a brand new embassy. And we would build things to UK standards. That's fine. How on earth are they going to maintain UK standards in a country that doesn't have earth in regards to their electrics? Now that threw up a bit of a spanner in the works, because the gap analysis we were doing about UK standards compared to what we might have was huge, and therefore, in the eyes of the Foreign Office, we may not be compliant. So we did what we could do about it. And then we also say, look, let's build stuff to standards we can maintain. That's the secret, isn't it? Surely. Otherwise, never come to Asia and stay in a hotel again, because you're staying in hotels that aren't compliant in your books. Yeah. So we did that. And part of the change we made in our team is that we had a compliance manager's role come up that we created. And there's a guy called Ewan McDonald who was in my team. He was one of the regional managers. But he had a real eye for detail and a real eye for wanting to be absolutely on point all the time in regards to making people safe. So he got his first gig doing that. And now he's global head of compliance for the Foreign Office. Wow. Ewan is probably the guy I would turn to if I talk about succession planning and what success looks like in your team. He taught me as much as I was able to support him in his role. He was able to have an honest conversation with you. He was able to, behind closed doors, say he thought I was wrong, that he thought the direction of travel might be this way, not that way. If I made a decision and say, look, the decision may be going that way, the shutters would go up, he'd go out, and he'd promote the idea that we're going that way, even if he disagreed with it. Ewan has a skill of being able to identify issues and come up with solutions. It's the first time in a long time I ever noticed anything like that in somebody. So I was very grateful for him changing the direction. And that's really what had the flip on Europe. We were doing that in Asia. We did the gap analysis then for Europe, and we found that we still had the same problems in just 21 miles across the channel.
That skill set of being able to identify issues and then talk them through and then empower people to come up with the solutions. That is a really rare skill set in itself, right?
It's really good. But I go back to my learning
Yeah.
and the leaders that I've worked under.
Yeah.
If Richard had said to me, "We trust you,"
Mm.
I knew I could go and have a conversation with him. So I took that without probably knowing I've taken it. So when someone says, "Well, can we have a word?" I agree with this, but I'm not sure, Nigel, you got this right.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I not listen? I don't have all the answers. And actually, I've taken on board over the years that you surround yourself with better people than you are.
Absolutely.
You get them to do a job, let them do the job. Don't go and check on them. What's the point? You might as well do it yourself then.
Yeah.
Or get someone in that just takes orders.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate enough to work with people like Ewan. I've got a great team at the moment in Kate, Michelle, and Justine. They're my three heads of separate departments. Michelle is head of operations, Kate's head of health and safety and compliance, and Justin is my strategic and right-hand person. They all know better than I do in their fields of operation.
Yep.
So when we get to meet and we talk about where should we be going, I say we need to get there. How do we get there? And we work out that actually this is the best route, and fine, we go and do it. And we find that we can overcome challenges together, but then we can celebrate successes even more when we get there.
Yeah.
But again, it's past leaders like Keith, Richard, and Paul Crowther that have taught me that skill base.
Yeah. I think that really kind of dives into the importance of strong mentorship, having strong leaders and identifying them and not being afraid to ask for support. I know, again, if I flip back into the early parts of my career, maybe it was just because it was a typical youthful male, that I always had that ego part of me that I know best. I don't want to ask someone for that help. Yeah. And I think if I look back and gave any advice to people coming out of school, higher education, whatever, don't be afraid to go and look for those people that can guide you. Put your guard down and look for that.
I agree with you. And I mentioned earlier about not really understanding what appraisal was like. In my first role as a manager, I've just let them get on with it.
Yep.
I think that this now shows the importance of one-to-one discussions.
Definitely.
Doesn't need to be weekly, doesn't need to be every day, but fortnightly catch-ups about how you're getting on with that project, because you can still have checkpoints. You can still make sure that you're on track by just asking the simple question, how are you getting on with it, where are the challenges, and let them tell you. If they're a bit shy about, I don't want to, tell them I'm messing up here or things are going wrong, it's okay to capture it early. Yep. And I think that puts the importance on governance meetings as well with our service partners. They have to have the trust that I like transparency. Mm-hmm. If things aren't working, tell me. I may not like to hear it, but once I know, we can support and find a way forward. If I don't know about it, I'm going to be more annoyed when it all goes a bit belly up.
Yeah, you can't fix something if you don't know what the potential problem is.
No.
And having that open, honest dialogue, whether it be from a supply partner or a team member, it just inoculates a lot of potential problems that could come down the track. I always say within our hub, if it's a great idea, it can withstand criticism.
Yeah.
And your job as a good manager, good leader, is to often be the dumbest in the room.
But
right?
Absolutely, you might have an idea,
yep.
And you share that idea. If three of them looking back at you like, "What are you on?"
Yep.
Maybe it's not such a good idea. After all, so but if they look at you going, "Oh, yeah, let's explore this," then you've won their hearts and minds already.
Yeah,
and you're going with it. You win their hearts and minds even if you don't go with it.
Yeah,
because they then trust you to come again next time.
And I think that is such a powerful lesson. And that phrase there, I've used that a lot. Operation Hearts and Minds is something I've often said along the way, right? But it is one of the most important parts. You can have the greatest ideas. If you don't have buy-in from everybody else on your journey, it's never going to come to fruition. No. You need to have that open, honest dialogue in the early stages. I think this could work. What do we all feel? And if we all kind of go, yeah, we're on it. Here's the pros, here's the cons. Right, let's start thinking about how that could be implemented and come to fruition.
And I was again, I'm very lucky to being able to recognise what a good boss mentorship looks like. Richard was my first, of course, but many years later, he became the mentor for Ewan. So Ewan McDonald, I mentioned earlier. Yeah. I phoned Richard up and said, "Would you do me a favour? Would you start just talking to Ewan? I don't want to know what the conversations are. I told Ewan I don't want to know. I just want him to have a talk." And Richard was great in doing that and saying overcoming challenges. If you felt a bit unsure about walking into a room and presenting, Richard was able to give him the tools as much as I was. So we did that, and now I talk to a young man on Richard's team over at Wimbledon,
Nice.
Billy, who is smashing it. Really, and it's about the core team, right? So as much as, and Richard may not thank me for saying this, but as leaders, it's not you that's really going to deliver this. It's you that's going to make sure it happens. The frontline team are the ones that deliver, and that goes for our service partners as well, our cleaners, our maintenance teams, and our security teams. It's those guys that really make this happen. So Billy's the one that makes sure Wimbledon opens on the day it's supposed to open and the roof shuts. And Richard just goes off and sits in the ballroom.
Yeah. Not bad, huh?
Not bad. No, but it is about the core team, I think.
Totally.
And you've got to appreciate where they come from.
We say the same thing. You're only as good as your weakest engineer. Right, they are the boys and girls that are on the front line doing the grunt work of it, the unsightly, the unpretty, and often 9 times out of 10 the unsexy part of the job, really. But the most important part. No two ways around it. Right, you can come up with, sit in an air conditioned office and come up with all the strategy, all the ideas, all the initiatives, bring it all to life. But I'm not out there getting my hands dirty, and it's those guys and girls that do that on a regular basis that really do bring all of our side.
So it's so important then to celebrate successes.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to, with your colleagues. So I work at the university. Those, my customers, I need to let them know how you can recognise someone's hard work. And we do have a staff awards. Most companies do every year. Last year, I think we had the most nominations we've ever received for different categories throughout the university. Going back to facilities management, we're no longer the poor relation of any business. We are front and centre. I do think that we've got a lot of work now, though, to keep us there. And I would like to see the sector, the facilities management sector, do a little bit more about apprenticeships, a little bit more about senior management training, leadership training, degrees in facilities management. I know it's out there. It's not very well advertised, and I think we're as good as any other industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, kind of going back to the beginning part, facility management for me is the glue that keeps all of it together. It's the filling in the Oreo, right?
Well, we had it a few times, right? So I spoke about the 7/7 bombings. In the Foreign Office, we had major floods in Jakarta, where there was horrible scenes of drowned people in the newspapers. But we kept that embassy open. There was people, service partners, that were coming out of their villages that were underwater, walking several miles to the embassy to clean it that morning, to keep the water from the doors so the embassy could operate. Now, and then they would go back home again. Now, they weren't on minimum wage. They're living in Jakarta. They are, families are suffering because their villages have been flooded, but they still make the effort to come and work. So the core business is actually needs to thank the frontline staff, but we do need to do more about recognising facilities management as a career choice.
Yeah, definitely, as a viable career option. So many people come, and you have it. I know I've heard it multiple times from having these types of conversations with fascinating people like yourself, where I fell into facility management. It's often the repeated wording, right? Didn't think it would be a viable option, had no idea what it was. But if more was done at grassroots level for people coming through the schooling, they ever kind of look at it and go, for me, for my takeaway, it either goes, you become on the tools, or you go, I'm going to head towards management and in an office. You don't necessarily look at that key part within facility management.
I'm fortunate enough. I sit on the executive board at the university. I'm at the table. I'm at part of the executive team. It's not too long ago that facilities management was never at the board table. We are now, and I think that COVID, as dreadful as it was, again shone a light on the importance of health and safety in facilities teams, keeping businesses operating, and digital colleagues as well in IT infrastructure, because that's how the world was run, through digital technology. We must embrace that now, recognise that, and bring that forward as an infrastructure piece for property going forward. And we just got to keep shouting the good shout. We're the ones that ensure that the students get to university every single day. We would be the first to hear if the university wasn't able to open because the lights went out. And I don't want to hear because they can get in. That's a real success.
Yeah.
But we do need to do more. And we're encouraging our service partners to celebrate success with us, let us understand what that looks like. We're talking to our service partners at the moment about apprenticeships. We're a university. Surely we can help them there at some point. And also their CPD training for their executive teams, because I think that's just as important. There's so many different angles now about what leaders should be taking charge of. You just go to the diversity agenda, the equality agenda. It's leadership that has to drive that. And I recognise that more and more working with 18-year-olds in the university, about how important this really matters to them as a subject. So the facilities arm, I believe, and the estates arm can really do a part there. Not just providing the facilities, but making sure that we are supporting the voice of our student base.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming close to the end now of this podcast. I'm not going to lie, that's the quickest I've ever known.
Yeah, it's been fantastic.
Some times go past, and I'm actually quite gutted that we haven't got more time on that clock in the bottom right of my eye.
Well, we could come back in 6 months' time.
I definitely think this is going to be a part two for sure. A couple of last kind of points from me. I suppose I'll end with this question. I always ask this. I like going down this route, memory lane. If you could rewind the clock and go to a 16-year-old version of yourself, what advice would you give to the 16-year-old version of yourself now?
Times have changed drastically, but if we were to say it was equal back in the day, don't be afraid if you have some challenges. As I say, I've got dyslexia. That could have destroyed me. But it's taken me around the world. I'm the director, I'm an exec. So don't be afraid of it, embrace it. Certainly look at embracing today's technology, because that can really help you. If you are wondering about where you are in your career, don't let anything define you, define yourself. So actually do look at facilities management. And if anyone wants a private conversation about how do you get into it, please do reach out. I'm more than happy to have 10 minutes with people, a coffee or a call or Teams. And continue to try. If you are an executive now and a leader and a manager, if it's your first gig as a manager, trust your team and trust your instincts. I've never, ever shot anyone for making a mistake. I might have had a cross work with people for giving up a bit early, but it's okay to make mistakes because that's the only way you're going to learn from it. So embrace that. Just try things. It's going to be okay. So give facilities management a ring, give them a look, try it. It's a fantastic career, but actually as an individual, trust people, embrace it, and do the best you can.
Absolutely. Solid sound advice, Nigel. Honestly, thank you so much for taking the time for coming
it's been
down.
A pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe, like, and share it with your nearest and dearest. And more importantly, stay tuned for more episodes. Nigel, for people that do want to try and find you, I assume it's search you on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
best
LinkedIn's the best route. It's a good source of networking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's the other thing. Network.
Network. It's all about the people.
It is. Yeah.
Right. Should we go get a beer?
Oh, hey.
Let's go.
Never ask.
All right.
Thanks
okay, cool.
So
no problem at all. Absolute pleasure.